you all for coming. My name is Mark Lieberman. I hope everybody is here for a discussion about business plans, a roadmap for success, right? Good. It made it much easier that nobody could have possibly still been in the library. I am not accustomed to standing still, and I'm not accustomed to disconnecting the computer either. So I will try to be careful here. Two things you should know before we start. There you go. Thing number one, and Mike already told you, Mike Gablowski is also with SCORE. One of the things I wanted to tell you already know, which is there's a videotape machine in there. It's stationary, she's turned it on. Whatever it picks up right over there. Second thing you should know is that there will be, that the videotape of tonight's presentation will be on the library website. So you can go back and look at it if you want. Also, there will be a PDF on the library website of all the slides we're going to show tonight. So you can download it, look at it whenever you want to. You can forget about it if you want to. But it's out there. It should be there tomorrow. If not, call the library and ask them what's going on. Okay, with that, I'd like to get started. A little word about SCORE before we go any further. That's my email address. Anybody who wants, if you stick through the whole presentation and you still want to talk to me, please do. You can get me there. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Did you get lost at the library?
No, there was a big accident.
Oh, there was?
Yeah, down the street.
Thank you. There's a sign-up sheet over there if you don't mind. Please,
Sure.
Please sign in and grab yourself some literature as long as you're here. A word about SCORE for those of you who may not be familiar with us. SCORE is a group of about 120 people here in the Chicago area, about 11,000 people across the country. The only thing we do is try to help small businesses grow and prosper. None of us are paid. We are all volunteers. We try to get businesses to grow and prosper in two ways. Actually three, but one doesn't count probably for this group. We do one-on-one consulting. We now call it mentoring. The important thing is that you'll sit opposite me and one of my cohorts or another SCORE counselor. Usually there's two of us. And we set up appointments, usually at libraries, and we will work with you, if you wish, from before you start up till after you can't stand this anymore. There will never be a charge for any of us. All we want to do is make sure you guys are going strong. That's our reward. If you come 100 times or if you come once, you will get the same bill. So please come all. Second thing we do is we put on a pretty wide assortment of classes. Some of them are free, for example tonight. Some of them aren't quite free, but they're pretty cheap. They might be somewhere between about $30 and $60. Those tend to be held downtown, but that's not always true. And if you go to the SCORE website, you'll be able to see when they are and what they're scheduled for. Generally, these are topics of business interest. In fact, always they are. How to use QuickBooks, or how to use LinkedIn, or what you should know about the internet, or how to put a marketing plan together, or things you should know about copies and copyrights and patents. Wide variety of subjects. See what interests you. With that, I think the best thing we can do is get started on our topic for tonight. Oh, one other ground rule. If I say something that isn't clear or that you want to ask a question about, don't wait till the end. Flag me down, we'll stop then, and try to answer it while it's fresh in everybody's mind. So don't think you're interrupting. The best thing that can happen to a speaker like me is somebody asks a question, because that means we're interacting. Okay, here we go. Tonight's topic is business plans. Why you do them and what should be in them and mistakes to avoid. Most people, how many people in the room are starting something or about to start something? Good. And the remainder of you, how many of people are already in business? 1, 2, 3, 5. Most folks start businesses without a business plan. You can do it, nothing stops you. My way of looking at life is you can go to Las Vegas and not know what you're doing and break the bank. Or you can know what you're doing and go home broke. Business planning is the same way. You can do anything you want without a business plan, but it greatly increases your probability of succeeding if you've got a plan. So my objective tonight is to show you how to put a plan together. There'll be a number of things that we'll cover and try to increase that probability of success. Here we go. First myth about starting a business, and this is our reason for putting the business plan together. First myth is all I need is a good idea to be a successful entrepreneur. I've been with SCORE personally for about, 3.5 years, I think. And generally what happens when people start up is they say, boy, I've got this great idea. And that's great. I'm happy for you. But that won't cut it. Won't bring home the bread. You need the good idea, but you're going to have a lot of hard work, a lot of research you've got to do, a lot of planning, a lot of implementation to make the business work, even if you're a one-man show. And so therefore, that's the purpose of the plan. Now, if you think of the plan as something you assemble once, and then you put it away, then you've wasted your time here tonight. A plan is a process. You do it, and then you come back to it, and you redo it, and then you come back to it, and you redo it. Now, that's not to say you have to sit there and treat it like a master's thesis. Lots of times people, particularly those who are looking for funding, and we're going to talk about looking for funding tonight, lots of times people are going to say, well, how long should it be? It should be long enough to serve as a guideline for you. And if you can do it in a page, great. If you need more because you're looking for financing, or there's a number of reasons why you might need more, that's fine too. There's no fixed length. The critical thing is the content, and that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. Okay, so why have this plan? What are you going to do with it? I like to tell people there's 4 things you ought to be able to get out of your business plan. Different ones are important at different times. The first thing, and you see it on the left. We all facing the same left? Yes. You see it on the left. The business plan will contain what we call an elevator speech. Anybody know what an elevator speech is? Yes, sir.
To put your idea on a matchbook cover.
That's it. Short statement of what makes you special. It's that simple. So you ought to be able to tell people what's important about what you're doing, what's unique, in a sentence or two. It's going to be in the business plan. Second thing, you're going to use it for promoting your business. It'll have your ideas. If you're seeking financing, it'll have more than your ideas. It'll have all, we'll talk about a more detailed table of contents in a minute, but it will have things in there that you will have to distribute to investors or to banks or to mom and pop or whoever it is going to be giving you money. Third thing, it's a motivator. Motivator for whom? Probably for you, because it'll keep your eye on the ball. I have a client, in fact I saw him yesterday, who is a bicycle retailer in the city, and the biggest service that his business plan provides, and it's literally, I don't know, we kept it to a page, is that every couple of weeks we get together and say, what do we need to be doing now to make this thing work? So it's a motivator because you've written it down. Fourth thing, and this is sort of special, I like to think of a business plan as a laboratory. It's your way of trying out different ideas and seeing if things work. I'll give you an example. I have a young lady who is starting a decorative box business. She needs some heavy equipment to cut cardboard and put applications, put designs on the cardboard. There's a significant question about how to finance this. There's a significant question about how to finance our operation, working through alternatives in the business plan. Welcome, please sign in, make yourself at home. Please sign in, grab some literature, and join us when you can. There's a significant question. We were able to address that through the business plan because we have a little model of how the business works, that kind of thing. But the critical thing is it's a way for you to try out ideas and evaluate alternatives. So there's 4 benefits you should get if you spent the time to put this together. Next thing, and if you leave here with only one idea, this is it, only you can write it. Do not hire somebody to do it for you. Get help, but you've got to do it. No one else is going to have the interest or the depth of knowledge that you guys have of your own business. All right, so with that, what's in a business plan? Now, keep in mind, it can be long or short, depending on who your audience is. If your audience is only you, you might not even have all these parts. If your audience is somebody or some groups from whom you're seeking a couple of $100,000 or whatever it is, you're going to have it all. If your audience is the bank, you're going to have it all. How many of you folks think you'll be seeking funds? Yeah. Don't leave here without letting me give you the 2-minute what's funding all about discussion. Try to. Don't think I'll forget that I've been known to. Those are the 7 pieces that you want to put in your plan somewhere. For the rest of the evening, we're going to walk through those 7 pieces. We're not going to do it in great detail, but you'll be familiar with what they are. There's a surprise here. Typically, when people number things, you can reasonably expect the speaker to start from 1 and go to 7. Forget it. We're going to start from 2, and number 1 is going to be the last thing we do. The reason for that is, number 1, the summary, is the last thing you're going to write. Yes, sir?
Would risk and competition be under market analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a look and see what's in some of these sections and address some of the contents. I'll tell you also that for most people, the most difficult section, and the one I'm going to spend a little more time on perhaps than some of the others, is section 7. And you'll see why when we get there. Don't panic. While you have to write the business plan, only you don't have to do it solo. So anything we talk about here, you should know you can come to SCORE, we'll help you with it. There are some aids that we'll be discussing as we go. 2 of them hopefully you've already picked up, the thing about starting in Illinois and the personal financial plan. There's way more stuff and I'll show you where to look for it. All right, so first thing you sit down and what are you going to do? You're going to present what we call a company summary. This is maybe 2 sentences. It's addressed to someone who doesn't know your company from, pardon me, from Adam. Just some basic information. Who owns it? Are you a startup? Are you an existing company? Where are you going to be? What kind of facilities do you have? That kind of stuff. Very short, not very difficult. You'll do it in nothing flat. And if the only audience is you because you don't need any money and you're independent and there's only one of you, you won't even do this. And that's okay. So what are some of the other things you might want to put in here? This is my favorite one. The first one, it says, describe the structure of your company. Are you a sole owner, what are you? If somebody were to say to me, what is the most frequently asked question I've seen as a SCORE counselor? I don't know how many people I've gone through, several hundred I imagine. Going through probably isn't the right term. But, I'd say the single most frequent question is this business about, gee, should I be an S corporation or a C corporation or L? Don't worry about it. This is an unimportant detail. You have to tell people what you are, and you're going to incorporate. We want you to do that. But the actual structure that you take, don't get hung up on it. Why? Because you can change it. Hey, you might have to write a little check. By little, I mean $100, $150. You might have to write a little check, but you can change it. So don't worry about it. Don't get hung up with lawyers. Focus on your business. How you're going to sell, what do you need? Don't worry about it. But you got to be able to explain things to people. Describe your company and give some general thoughts.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have contact on where, if you want to be an LLC, where you would go?
Yeah, there's a brochure up here talking about starting a business in Illinois.
It's in that one.
It's in that one. If you have, the state of Illinois, as long as you brought it up, thank you. Question is about starting an LLC, where do you go? The state of Illinois, it turns out to be very cooperative. Don't be ashamed to ask somebody in the Illinois Secretary of State office about anything. They're happy to hear from you. As long as you're not yelling at them, they'll tell you anything you want to know. So be polite, but call them. They're generally nice people. If you have some time, we can talk about LLCs in particular. But it's an easy process. It seems mysterious. If it takes you an hour and a half, you can do it online, you're done with it. Okay. The third point here is the fourth, is what I want you to keep in mind more than any of the others. Right up there in the front of the plan, and in the front of your mental awareness, is something that says, why is it that what you offer responds to customer needs and wants? What's special about what you do? Because if there is nothing special, you will fail. Just the way it works. You'll be one of the crowd. On the other hand, if there's something special about you, you'll greatly have expanded your chance of success. So yeah, it's on the bottom, and it seems like it goes by quickly, and it seems trivial, but that's what's going to make you work. You have to know why somebody should want to do business with you, and you've got to say it in a sentence. Okay. For those of you who may be doing this plan and are existing companies, you've got a little bit more to say. Tell them what you've got and how long you've been in business, and there's a variety of things you can talk about. So there's a slight difference in what you'd have here if you're an existing company or a new company. Easy, nothing to it, right? Everybody can do that. And typically they do, because people don't feel like there's anything technically difficult in this section. Now we're working up to the next harder section. You need to describe your product or service, and some of you will have both a product and a service. You may be selling something that needs to be installed. You're selling fixtures and the service that goes along with them. You may be primarily a service. You may be giving massages. You may be giving haircuts. Either way, you've got to describe your product, keep it simple, and a little bit about where you're getting it and how you stack up against your competition. I want to focus on that one for a second. If you think that you've got a unique product for which there is no competition, you're wrong. There's probably nothing on earth for which there is no competition. You may have not discovered it, but it's there. Competition means a lot of different things, and you've got to think about who else is out there. It could mean that their product isn't quite exactly the same, but it might serve the same need. You know, maybe you have a piece of software that does something. Somebody else's software maybe isn't quite the same as yours, but it still enables the customer to get the same job done. Used to be there a variety of different spreadsheet programs. They all look pretty much similar. And we can talk sometime about how it is that Excel became pretty much the only one out there. Was there competition? Sure was. Used to be a lot. All right, so you need to have a clear focus on what your product or service is. Yes, sir?
Mark, is there a one-stop shop to find exactly how many of your competitors are out there?
Maybe. It depends on what... A good question, thank you. The question is, how do you identify your competitors? There's a couple of things you can do. And it's changed greatly in the last couple of years. Depending on the business that you're in, you may be able to find a trade association. And they'll typically make a list of members available to you. However, there may not be a trade association, or it may be that they want $5,000 to join. So then what do you do, right? Well, you can always do internet searches. You know, you poke around for a couple of hours, you get a pretty good list of competitors. Keep in mind, yes, sir.
Reference USA will tell you Reference USA, tell you pretty much about how many competitors.
Yes, good point, thank you. There is a book called Reference USA. It's broken out usually by SIC code, standard industrial classifications. If you need help identifying things, talk to the reference librarian at your friendly neighborhood library. They love nothing more than to have someone come with a focused question, and they'll bend over backwards to make sure that you get the right answer. And they'll make things immediately available to you. They're trained in searching for things. Typically, they get questions like, are you open late on Friday? Right? Well, you know, just the way it is. And they answer those. That's not their bread and butter. They want to help. So yes, you're right about Reference USA, but maybe they don't have it at the Barrington Library. It's okay. She'll either get it or she'll give you something just as good. So we talked a little bit about the internet, a little bit about trade associations, a little bit about Reference USA. Sometimes you find out who your competitors are by driving around. Just look and see who's in your neighborhood. For many of you, someone who's more than, say, 15 or 20 miles away, although they may have the identical product or service, is not your competitor. So if you drive around, you'll be able to see your competitors. Again, I have a client who has a business where he rates automobile repair shops. Well, all automobile repair shops are offering the same products and services, just the way it is. But who wants to go to downtown Chicago to go to an automobile repair shop? So is he a competitor of yours? No. Sometimes geography works to your advantage. So you've got, it's not a trivial inquiry, but you understand where to go for it. Good.
Thank you.
All right. You need to clearly define your business idea. What customer need are you fulfilling? What's the customer's problem that you've solved? I just had lunch, actually I just left the pizza place across the street with a couple of new SCORE clients who have a very creative product, and the question is, what customer need does this thing solve? You maybe would have thought they would have known that before they put the product together, but that's a different discussion. You need to know very clearly who the customers are that you're addressing. Now, it might change over time as you get into the marketplace and you learn more about what's going on, but you need to know who they are. If you don't, you can't put together a marketing plan. It's that simple. We'll talk about marketing plans in a second. So you need to know those things. You need to know the benefits of your product, why you're better than the next guy. Again, it sounds trivial. It should go in your business plan in this section. Talked a little bit about competition. I think we've probably beaten this one far enough into the ground. But these are some of the other variables that you're going to need to discuss, and you need to know what your competitor is going to do. Does he charge more? Does he charge less? Does he deliver timely? Does he come to this neighborhood? Does he have the same variety we have? It's not as simple as knowing that I sell it for $5 and he sells it for $5.50 or $4.50. Things just aren't that packed. Buying decisions both of businesses, business to business, if you're selling to a business or you're selling to a consumer, it's never as simple as just price, unless you're on the stock exchange, then it's as simple as just price. Okay, so there's some things you need to know about your competition and yourself. We together so far? Still seems pretty easy, right? Nothing you can't do quickly. Let's talk about market analysis. You'll hear some terms whenever you talk about market analysis. The first thing people tend to talk about is market segmentation. Fancy word. Does that mean anything to anybody? That's what I figured. It's okay. Market segmentation just says, if you are selling diapers and there's 100,000 mothers out there, how can you go and sell to all 100,000? Or can you only sell to the ones in the neighborhood? Or are your diapers going for rich mothers or poor mothers? You get the idea. How do you define subsets of the marketplace? A market segment is a market subset. Another fancy word. It's less than everything. How do you define who you want to sell to? Now, if you don't know that, once again, you're not going to be able to put a marketing plan together because you won't know who you want to address with your website or who you want your advertisements to go to. Or are there enough people out there so that maybe I should be on television or the radio or print advertising? Are they wealthy people who tend maybe not to care so much about how much the price is? They're more interested in quality or delivery. Or are they perhaps people with not as much income who care? Welcome. Please sign in if you get a chance, and you can get it later. We're glad you found us. Maybe they're not as well heeled, and they do care more, perhaps, about price. You've got to know, and that's what we mean by market segmentation. Yes?
So what you're saying is, say your target is wealthier people or affluent people because it's a luxury item.
Yeah.
For example,
Porsches.
you're selling luxury travel in Belize or whatever. You're not going to go to the South Side or so
Well,
as you're
there are areas in the South Side.
You
might-
can.
but yes, you're quite right. That's right.
But so you'd want to target. So the market segmentation would be the affluent people, correct?
Yeah.
Is that an example?
You've got it exactly right. Or if you're, this is a trivial example, but if you're selling men's sporting goods, right? Don't advertise in Shape magazine. Right. But you get the idea. And there are many people who put out directories telling you who looks, for example, at their magazines or their TV shows or their websites, because they know the demographics, they know who's doing this, and you can do some matching. It's important that you know who. You can't say what people need if you don't know who the people are. And this is true if you're selling to businesses or to consumers. Anybody here whose product or service they think will be for a business? A couple of folks. What are you selling, sir? Or what are you proposing in the blue shirt? Yeah.
Adventure camps.
Oh, okay. That's certainly a business, sir. In the green area.
Yeah.
Well, you're both sort of in the green. And then first,
Collaboration software.
oh, that's interesting. But the people who will be using it are businesses as opposed to consumer product. Interesting. I'd like to hear more about that one. Sir, what do you have?
I'm selling myself.
Oh, well, we all do that. Some of us are better at it than others, but, good. Well, the critical thing is these are things you have to know whether what you're doing is addressing a business or a consumer. Some questions you might want to ask. Can you define the benefit people are going to get from what you're doing? If you're selling yourself, you better have some extra special secret expertise in some way. And that's what you're selling.
Right.
But specifically, what's the person going to get from it? Well, maybe he's going to save time. Maybe he's going to save money. Maybe he can introduce some variety. Maybe he's more efficient. But what you're really selling is that efficiency, that benefit to him, which he gains through your knowledge. The knowledge itself usually don't do it. Yes, sir?
I cold call people.
Ooh,
For
no
business.
one likes cold calling.
I do.
Do you?
Sure.
You are unusual.
No, well, I don't look at it as a rejection when they say no.
Good for you.
It's my job, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, good for you. That's a special skill. I've never met anybody who had that kind of attitude about it, but it's what it takes to be good at it.
Right.
Yep. All right, so what are your benefits? Who's out there? A minute ago, what's the total market? Who's out there? A minute ago, we talked about how can you tell who your competitors are? A similar kind of question is, how can you tell who your market is? How many folks might be eligible? Go to the library, particularly if you've got a consumer product. Go to the library. The librarians will have endless directories, usually put out by the Census Bureau, but not always, telling you how many redheaded children there are between 5 and 10 years old in your zip code. I mean, it is that finite, that well-defined, and the librarians will be happy to show it to you. It's worth the trip, and it's free. If you're looking for businesses, they will have similar sorts of directories, similar inquiries you can run, so that you'll know what other businesses might be able to use your product. So don't pass that step up. You need to know those things. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky. You know what? The best way to find out who your customers are tends to ask the folks who are already your customer. Particularly if you're in a consumer business, where you meet the consumer. Now, some of us, like this gentleman, may never see his customer. It depends how you sell. But if you're selling over the internet, you never see your customer. So it's a little bit more difficult to find out who they are and what they're looking for. That is not to say you can't contact them another way. You don't see them over the counter. You can send an email. You can ask them to fill out a survey. You can run a promotion where if they'll answer some questions for you, you'll give them something. You'll give them points or free dollars or a discount. The critical thing is the best way to find out how people perceive you is to ask them. So keep that in your quiver. A few other questions you can ask. But this is something you really have to know. Why are you different? Why do people perceive your difference? Together? Okay. What else is in the business plan? Next section. We're coming up to that critical section 7, so stay with me. There needs to be you have to have a strategy. You need to be able to summarize that strategy. First question to ask yourself is, what is it such that if it fails, your whole business goes down the tubes? For many of us, it's simple. It's cash, right? We have a certain amount of cash that it's only going to last us for however it's going to last us. You may hear the term burn rate. Anybody heard of a burn rate? What's burn rate?
It's how much money you have every month and how much you spend.
It's that simple. How long you can last. If the business starts to go down, how long can you last before you've spent your cash reserve? So sometimes the thing that if it fails will tank your business is cash. But not always. Sometimes the thing that will tank your business is a supplier who's in China. And he sends you a shipment of stuff that's off-color. Or it's the wrong size. Or it's mismarked. Or it's late. Whatever those critical factors are, you need to know them, and you need to get up every day and make sure you're on top of them. If you don't, you're dead in the water. You need to set goals in your action plan, and you need to print that plan out, like it says, 4 times, and put it everywhere so you see it all day long. There are critical factors in your business. You've got to identify them and look at them every day. It's very easy when you get into the hurly-burly world out there and you get your business going, it's very easy to overlook those critical factors. We all do. In my business, I've started 4 businesses. I remember very clearly in my first one, I was the salesperson. My job was to respond to customer calls. I used to hate, unlike this gentleman, I used to hate cold calls. And when it rang and it was a stranger, when the phone rang and it was a stranger, because it was a person-to-person sale, I was afraid. I really didn't want to answer the phone. Well, you either overcome it or you find somebody who can do it. But if that's going to be the critical thing in your business, focus on it. So you see what we're doing. The business plan is just a structured way to get you to think about what's important in your business, how you're doing, what you have to keep on top of. Some keys to success, things that might help you. There's others, but you get the idea. Know what they are. The folks I was talking to an hour ago had a very, what do I want to call it? A very sort of esoteric software product. they were hung up on patents and intellectual property. Most folks don't even know what those things are. We can talk about them, but you need to know if you're delivering a quality product that your customer is happy with. You need to know if your location is right, if you're in a bricks and mortar situation. Are you in the right place on the internet if you're presenting yourself that way? Are people coming to you? The other SCORE gentleman that was here, Mike, specializes in talking to people about LinkedIn and how to present themselves on the internet. And although I shouldn't talk for him, I've gone to a couple of his discussions. And frequently one of the things he found, he's alerted me to it, is that folks will put up a website and they'll spend money for it, and it'll look beautiful, but they have no notion of how many people are actually visiting the website. They're just, you say you get 100 hits today, did you get 50, did you get 500, they don't know. Because they don't think about measuring those things. They can be measured. You have to know what's working. Because if you don't, one of two things has happened. Either you're not spending enough money where you should be, or you're spending too much money where you shouldn't be. You need to know those things. Okay, so there are some keys to success. You've got to keep them in mind. Sometimes you just say, I want to talk to somebody. Come find a SCORE mentor. Let's talk about it. That's what we do. We don't talk about it. We'll actually all be working on it. Talking about it's no fun. You need to set goals for yourself and your business. You might hear the term SMART goals. SMART is an acronym. You can see what it means. The critical thing here, there's a couple of things here. Your goals need to be such that you can measure them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're financial, although there might be. Again, the fellow that I had that's a bicycle store, his objective, we've had some problems here, you'll know in a minute, is to get his payables. Everybody know what a payable is? It's a bill. You owe it to somebody. He wants to get all of his payables so that they're no more than 90 days past due. Well, if somebody's payable is 90 days past due, what's it tell you? Yeah, he's in the soup. Yeah, he's in the soup. But the bad news is he's in the soup. The good news is he can define his problem. We're going to work through it because he's a hard worker and he knows what he has to do and he set meaningful goals. So make them something you can measure. You want 500 hits on your website. You want 50 new leads. You want to sell 30 cars this month. They need to be measurable in some way. Some things are harder than others. You shouldn't be doing anything when you can't tell if it's working. Right, so you'll hear that called a SMART goal. Figure out what they are, pick 2 or 3, and sit on those goals. I don't like accountants. Anybody in here an accountant? I should have asked that first. The problem I have with accountants is that you're all going to need an accountant. If you're starting out your business and think that you don't need an accountant, you're wrong. It's a special skill and you're going to need one. You don't have to spend a lot of money for it, and there's things you can do to control the cost, but unfortunately, an accountant is a cost of doing business. The problem with this thing you should be on the lookout for is typically they are concerned with one thing. Well, yes, but even more than that, they are concerned with whether or not you're complying with the tax code. Well, I'm concerned with whether you're complying with the tax code too, don't get me wrong, but there is business information in your financial statements that the accountant should want to help you work with and understand and put in a context, and typically they don't do that. So if you get an accountant who isn't going to help you find your goals and put them in some kind of a meaningful content, then find another accountant. And we can come back to that later. I don't dislike all accountants. Okay, one final thing before we get to the critical number 7. You want to talk a little bit about your company organization and a little bit about your company culture and what's important to you, who your founders are, and what you're going to do to retain employees. Now, some of you won't have that problem because you're single proprietors. You're it. Well, when you're it, maintaining an employee isn't much of a trick. But when you're not it, and particularly if you're growing, maintaining an employee becomes critical. I saw an interesting videotape. The Wall Street Journal puts out a small business guide. It's part video, sometimes it's print, and if you're into the Wall Street Journal, you'll see this. But today I saw a video that ran about 3.5 minutes of a small business guide, and it was a woman-owned business on the West Coast somewhere, excuse me, on the East Coast. And not only was it woman-owned, but it turned out that all the employees, I think there were 6 of them, were females, I'd say between about 20 and 30, in around there. Maybe it was 25 to 35, but you get the idea. What did they do to maintain corporate spirit? Once a month, the company took them all out to a nail salon, a nail salon, not a nail. Yeah, probably, but I can't talk about that here. Took them all out to a nail salon. Get them polished, you understand? And at first I saw that and I thought, this is stupid, this isn't going to work. Well, it did work, because she knew her employees and they were in an age group where that was a fun thing to do, and it got them talking to one another. So, if you're a one-man business, this isn't so important. But if you're not a one-person business, this whole notion of organization and keeping employees becomes very important. Again, if you're inexperienced, please come and talk to us. We have people who are good at this kind of stuff, and they'll share their knowledge and expertise. In your business plan, you want to talk about, if you're more than one, who are the managers and why should people like you? Now, even if you're only one person, particularly if your business is only one person, particularly if you're seeking financing, you need to stress your personal requirements, because it counts to the bank, it counts to a venture capitalist if that's where you're going, it counts to a lender if that's where you're going. Don't be shy. In your business plan, particularly, again, if you're looking for investors, your job is to beat your chest. And you want to be convincing, but you don't want to be shy. Okay. There is such a thing as company culture. But I clearly can't pronounce what you do to maintain it, so I think I'll just stay away from it tonight. But you get the idea. How people work together, what makes them happy in the job place. Salary is only one element of that. And in many cases, it's not a defining element, because there may be several places where a person can get the same pay. So he looks for things other than pay, and you need to provide them. So company culture, you want to figure out how you keep people, and you want to put that in your plan. Okay, we are now, yes sir,
So which section would the business objective go in?
up at the very front.
So,
And you'll see it again in a second in the summary.
and so I'm including objective like grow the business for 3 years and sell it off to
Absolutely.
so-and-so.
Yes. That's going to be on the very first page, and you'll see it come up again. That's a good question. This is the section where, when I get clients coming to see me and my co-mentors, typically folks have everything else in their plan. They know how to do that. And they get to this and they freeze. They say, I can't do a financial plan. You can do a financial plan. Maybe you can't do it by yourself. Maybe you need some help. But the help is there. That's what SCORE is all about. So don't panic. This is no big deal. It's just one more thing you have to do, particularly if you're seeking financing. You won't get a nickel from anybody without a financial plan. The only exception to that might be if you're getting money from mom and dad. Now, some people are lucky, right? If you're lucky, good, that's great. What could be better? I have a client whose parents, his secretary, whose parents are giving her $200,000. Makes life a lot easier. I thought of that, but I didn't say it. She said she didn't have to work if she did, and that's true. You know, if you can get money from friends and family, maybe they don't care about some of the things we're talking about, but you won't get beyond that. Yes, sir, George?
Maybe you're going to mention this, but on the SCORE website, score.org, there are templates for cash flow analysis and other business plan and so on and so forth that will help you.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to get to that in a second, but George is quite right. One of the reasons you can do this is because we're going to give you some fill-in-the-blank stuff to make it easy for you. Why do you need financials? I'm going to beat this one to the ground a little bit because it's the one I think where most folks don't feel comfortable with themselves. That's the reason. Set your goals. Find out if you're there yet. It's that simple. This is your road. You need to know what kind of funding you need, and you need to be prepared to answer some questions about it. I had a lady who came in to see me a week ago. This was a tough session. She was looking for startup funds, and I asked her how much she thought she needed, and she said, oh, I don't know, maybe $500,000. Yes. But I'm not allowed to do that. You can do that. It's great. But that was my take. And well, how did you come up with that number? I mean, you know, she might have needed that. I have no idea. You need to know what you need, what you're going to do with it, how you're going to deploy it, and why. And if you don't, unless your parents are going to give it to you, your son. We frequently get people who come in and ask us for grants to start their business. Two things. Anybody here looking to do a nonprofit? Okay, you may be able to find a grant. Maybe you already know the sources, and if you don't, you go to the library. But this is what I'm about to say is not true of nonprofits, because nonprofits typically look for grants, as you know. If you are not a nonprofit, you will not find a grant. You can just forget about it. I don't know where people get these ideas. If you are a for-profit organization, you got a few alternatives. You finance it yourself, you borrow money, you raise equity. Now, there's lots of variants on those, but that's it. No one's going to contribute to you. I don't know where that net came from. Okay, so you need to know these things, and as George points out, there's a set of things that people want to know. If you are going to a lender or an investor, these are some of the things they're going to ask you. And there's only one way to answer these questions. You need a set of financial statements. Nothing short of a set of financial statements is going to satisfy these people. You can't, if we would have been having this discussion a year ago, and we would have been talking about financing your starting business, or even a going business, it would have been a very short discussion. Maybe not a year ago, but certainly 2 years ago. And we were talking about financing your business, I would have adjourned and we'd go have pizza and call it a night, because you just weren't going to be able to do it. It just wasn't out there. That is no longer true. Has anybody tried to do any significant financing in, say, last 2 or 3 years? Did you find anything? Did you find anything? You did, Matt? No? What did you find?
I got a line of credit.
Good for you. We got to talk a little bit about line of credit if we get a chance. You were the exception. When did you get it?
November of last year.
Okay. Then things were already getting better by then. Now let me take again a guess. You got it from a community bank.
Fifth Third.
That's not quite a community bank. It's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed it Fifth Third. For those of you who want to talk a little bit more about this, we'll talk about banks and where you look for things. But the critical thing is that banks are lending. It is possible. Now, lending is different from equity, but banks are lending, and there is equity capital out there. And we'll talk about it for those of you who have that need in the question and answer period. All right, now, I said you need a complete set of financial statements. And frankly, you should have this even if you aren't going to the outside. The thing in the middle that says cash flow, to me, is the most important financial statement there is, but most people don't know what it is. I don't know why that is. Everybody, when they think of financial statements, thinks of a P&L, an income statement in the lower right-hand corner. That's important. And for some of you, those two will be the same. We can talk about why they're not the same. For everybody, we don't have to do that now. The critical thing is, this is what people are going to be looking for. You need to have it. If you don't know how to put it together, George's statement is right. We have some fill-in-the-blank statements. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I can show you how they look. But don't panic. Don't think you can. Now notice what starts the top of this flow. It says service-oriented sales plan, product-oriented sales plan. What is that? Just what you think. It's how many of something you think you'll be able to sell in a month, or how much service you'll be able to deliver, or how many of something you have to install. It's how much business you're going to do. You need to have a sales plan that needs to be month by month. You need to measure yourself against it. There is no substitute. And you are not allowed to do it and put it on the shelf and never look at it again, because that's a senseless exercise. If you have that, everything else is sausage grinding. You put the sales forecast in, you take the crank, the statements come out. And that's what we supply. Now, there will be some things you don't know, particularly when you start up your business. Sales plans are hard to get because you've got no history. Insurance, you know how much your insurance is, you've never bought it. You don't necessarily know how much your product is going to cost. Maybe it's a software product like this gentleman. You don't necessarily know what the cost of developing the software is. I know that one, I've been there. You've got to estimate it. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. See how it says nothing, something, imperfection? I really believe this. You've got to estimate it. You might make a mistake. You'll change it. But you are not allowed, don't worry about perfection. You are not allowed, however, to make no guess. Take your best cut at it, change it, and find out it's wrong. There's something else you might want to do here. It gets back to your question, sir, about how do I find competition, and how do you know how to estimate these things, particularly if you're starting from scratch. Go to the library and ask her for something called RMA. I have entirely forgotten what RMA stands for. She should have an RMA guide, which will give you by type of industry or type of company a typical, and size of company, ratios of what percentage of cost of goods to sales they tend to have, or what are their expense percentages, how much debt do they tend to have. And it'll be broken down by small companies, medium-sized companies, big companies. So if you don't know, it's always better to know. You don't have last year's bills and go talk to people. Those kind of things count. But in order to make some estimates, go to the library. They're there for you. Free services are wonderful. Now, here's George's point. He's right. When you are doing things, there are always two ways to, when you're doing these statements, there's always two ways to do them, right? You can do them this way, the wheel way. You can invent techniques for doing them. You can do it all the time. Don't do that. You're just going to spend a lot of time, and you're not going to get your business going. Oops. Come to SCORE. We will give you, you can look at 500 business plans, literally 500. That's not a figurative number. There are 500 sample business plans at score.org, the national website. You can look at them, see what they look like. You can go to the public library. Most libraries have, I think it's an 18-volume set, it might be a couple of volumes of bound business plans. The purpose is to look, see if you've covered the waterfront the way the other guys have. Get a counselor to help you put together the financial statements. Yes, sir.
Would every library have something like this, or would it be better to go to like a main one, like a downtown one, or like a...
If you go to the Harold Washington Library, they'll have it. But it used to be that they were the only ones who did. That's no longer true. Schaumburg has a great library. Most of the suburbs have great libraries. The Barrington Library is quite good. There are a few.
Mark,
that
we have a lot of them online. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if we have them all at Barrington, but a lot of the libraries will have them in databases now.
Yeah.
Hello.
There's an incredible amount of stuff that you used to not be able to get that's now in databases, and the libraries subscribe to, makes it easier because you couldn't otherwise get it. So you can get these reference data. Again, just go and ask. You don't even have to look for it, they know where it is. The only thing I don't want you to do is invent that wheel. Okay, now, we've gone through 6 sections of stuff. Hopefully, you're not any longer frightened about how you're going to do the financials. So we're going to do the first act, the prelude to your plan. And that's what we call the executive summary. And you can't do that first because you haven't thought through the rest of the stuff. What goes in it? Somebody already brought up some of this. There's your mission statement, what you're trying to do, your objectives, why you're in business, what are your critical success factors, your keys to success. That's where it goes. A paragraph, maybe 2, up on the front. If you're going for financing, it's quite likely this is all they'll look at. You never know. You have to have all that other stuff, but that doesn't mean anybody has to look at it. You need this to keep focus. Okay. What's a mission? A mission is what you think it is. An objective is. It's important to have these things, and as you look at more of what other people have done, which you can do at the library, you'll see how these things are done. What are the details of your summary? You see it here. There's a funny little number on the bottom. It's called ROI. It's just a fancy way of saying, if instead of spending all this money on starting my business, I put it in the bank instead, how much return would I get? And you want to exceed that. Now, today, it's not much of a trick to exceed what the bank gets. But to some extent, that's got to be, your criteria, unless you're a nonprofit. Then things change. But, as my friend, I have a friend who runs a nonprofit. It's about a $2 million annual. And I went to see Harlan a little while ago because I had a client, like you, who was a nonprofit organization. And I really didn't feel very active because I had never run a nonprofit. And he told me something I didn't know, but I'll bet you do. There's nothing to choose here. Nonprofits have to cover their expenses just like anybody else. The only difference is you don't necessarily get it exclusively by selling something. You have to have a budget for grants and all that. See, that was news to me. I never thought of it that way. So the things that you're doing here are the same things you have to do in a business plan for either a profit and a nonprofit. The difference is some of the terminology you use, and there's a funding source that's available to nonprofits that profit organizations don't have, which is grants and contributions. There's one other thing that for-profit companies have that not-for-profits don't have. There's a silent partner that all of us for-profit companies have, and the silent partner is the fence. Right? So I don't want to make it sound like things are identical. They're not, but they're pretty similar. Okay. So you write it. A couple of things now. You've got all your thoughts together. You've got a bunch of notes. A couple of things you can think about. First, and we've said this before, you have to write it. Don't spend the money to get somebody to do it. Because folks looking at your business plan know, 2 reasons really. One is because people looking at your plan know you didn't write it. It shows. It's like if I built a car or somebody who knew what they were doing built the car, right? That would show. Second is, if somebody else has written it, you understand it. Yes, ma'am?
I wrote the plan, but I had someone feedback.
Oh, that's great.
The problem is they're saying there's no me in it. What does personality mean in a business plan? I thought it was structural and this is how it is. No? You're making that face.
It sort of depends. I don't think there's a bad answer to it. I think there really is a lot of, if you're writing, if you're going to a funding source, rather than something that's only going to be consumed internally. Yeah, it's pretty formal. But if that's not the case, or if you're a particularly strong personality, me in a thing might make some sense. Or if you have no money and you're praying that nobody will notice, then first rule of going to the bank is, oh come on, you've heard this one before. Banks only lend to
People
Don't need.
it's okay. It's okay.
Don't
We're
need
friends,
money.
folks. You know, we've all been through it. And there's some truth to that. But, you know, their rules aren't... Moses did not come down and give lending rules to bankers, right? Their rules are not cast in stone. There's some leeway, and your personality can make up for something that maybe your background or your financial stuff. So maybe that's what your friend was
Where
suggesting.
would you put it though? This is what I'm a little confused about.
Well, you can't tell jokes in a business plan, for
Yeah.
sure. But maybe what she said is, I'm just guessing, maybe what she was thinking is when she talks to you, you're vibrant and you really convince people that this is a strong idea. And maybe that didn't come across in the written plan, and that had to. So if that was the case, then it would be right. But, you know, can you make jokes about, I'm going to have a 400 square foot office? No. Can you make jokes about, I've really got 8 months, or can you cover up the fact that I've got 8 years of experience or 8 days of experience? No, the best thing to do is make a clean breast of it. The toughest one I ever had was a guy who was a felon who had served his sentence and was now looking for a bank loan. And his question was, can I cover up my conviction? He felt like he was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. You can get the loan. But it wasn't because of the conviction. It was a time when nobody short of a Rockefeller or a Carnegie would have gotten it. So maybe that's what she meant. You just weren't conveying the enthusiasm for the business that you really felt. Okay, so you got to write it. Only you can do it. There are some software packages that will help you. They're not bad. They're not bad. You just got to be careful about how to use them. You understood one of these tricks. Ask somebody for feedback before you show it to anybody you know is critical. And revise it all the time. Make it a living document or forget it. Common mistakes. You haven't done your homework. Go to the library. Talk to people. Walk around. You don't understand the market. You've got some crazy financial projection. 2 months ago, roughly, maybe 3, I had 2 very nice people come. They wanted to open up an organic farm in Michigan. They had no idea of how many acres of anything it took to get a significant crop. Unrealistic financial projections. Overhype. Big mistake. People see it right off the bat. Okay. Some concluding comments. This addresses George's comments. Go to the SCORE website. ScoreChicago.org and SCORE.org have all sorts of stuff. It's not going to cost you anything to help you go through this process. There's about a 60-ish page book there is that's not going to cost you anything. It's a PDF, you download it, it's got a bunch of forms in it. There are blank financial statements. Most critical one is the little one in the front. At least to me, the most critical one is the little one in the front. This is what are your startup expenses? And it lists, I don't know, 12 or 18 categories, some of which you may have otherwise overlooked. It's free. Download. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. Go to one or both of those 2 sites, poke around, see what's there. Look at other plans. Get counseling. Come see us for some one-on-one feedback on particular problems, or where you should go for loans, or how do you overcome certain problems you may be turning up. We like to mix it up and get some questions and answers. Okay. That's it. Enough of that. We've got a few minutes. They're not going to kick us out. Maybe some of you came in with particular things you were really hoping I'd addressed, and I didn't. Or there's just something you're curious about. Let's take a few minutes, if you wish. I'd like nothing more than to just have some give and take and entertain anything as I on your mind, particularly if you're a startup, but if you're here at all, there must be something that's gnawing at you. And if it's gnawing at you, it's gnawing at somebody else. So let's see if we can get it up in the air and address it. Yes, sir.
Does the mentoring program deal with different market? I know that the SCORE organization has different executives for different markets. They came out of different markets. But in the Chicago area, are there, like, including, like, one of the things, I came from Pittsburgh. I was going to start a business there. There was no one in my market that was available to me.
Yeah, we're an unusually big chapter. I think we're one of the 3 biggest ones in the country. And I can't, what's your market?
Food service.
Oh, Dan Pollock. Just write it down.
Dan Pollock?
Yeah. He's the food manager. Dan had a family-owned meat, I think it was, so an operation where I think he sold meat to restaurants. I'm not sure. But the critical thing is he's the go-to guy.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
How do I determine what type of profit I want to make?
It has to be. You ever hear the story about Abraham Lincoln? They asked him something about how tall a man should be, and he said something like, tall enough so this, he can reach the ground when he sits or something like that. It's the same kind of thing. How much profit you have to make is determined by how much it takes to make you happy. Now, I know that sounds facetious, but I don't mean it to. Some people are very pleased. Let me give you an example. Is there anybody here who's thinking of looking at a food franchise? Good. Typically, food franchises, Subway, they don't make very much money. But they feel secure because their bosses can't hire them. Maybe you've noticed that when you go there, they're often family operations. That's because they're not paying the children. The kids are in there and they make sandwiches or whatever. So those people are satisfied with less profit because they're getting other benefits. In my businesses, that wouldn't have cut it for me, and maybe it doesn't for you. Maybe you have an income that you need to address. So there's no easy way to answer that question.
So would that be, which is said something about profit versus profit margin. So, I mean, I can make a profit margin of 5%, but if I have enough volume moving, then I make 5 million. So it's like, is it a profit margin or is it profit? Because, I mean,
I think the profit is bottom line, what's on the bottom line.
yeah, because I work in the food, I mean, even though I work in the food industry,
Yes.
I want to actually start a cosmetic business.
Yes. And
And
you've always
I
got
actually-
these big margins with much
Yes.
smaller volume.
Yes, and I work in product development where we actually go through how much the raw material costs, the packaging, all and all of that. And we know what market segment we want to sell to. And based on that, we can tell,
Yeah.
we can decide that this is going to be 15% margin type of business versus 30%, right?
I think this gets back to the objective of the business as well, like I mentioned earlier. And if your objective is to sell it, then your margin view is different than if it's to use it to support you.
Yeah, and I don't mean to sidestep your question. One thing you can do, if you wish, is again, get this, just now I can't remember, our RMA book, which will show you what typical operations similar to yours might earn. And maybe that becomes a target. However, maybe you're satisfied with less because you feel good about owning your own business. Or maybe you need to have more because of some outside financial operations. So I don't have a bad answer.
Also, Mark, your cash flow analysis,
Yeah.
if you do it well, you'll know what your overhead costs are predicted to be, and you'll know what your sales are predicted to be, and whatever's left is your profit.
Yeah, George is right, and there is a lower limit beneath which you can't go. And only you can address that. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
So if someone says, okay, you've got 40%,
Yeah,
do I multiply times 40% or do I divide by 0.60?
Okay. That depends a little bit on the way, now I'm with you, now I see where you're coming from. People don't use consistent terminology. That's always a problem. So some guy says, oh, well, I made 40%. If you pay me 50 cents for this, you can sell it for $1, you're making 100%. It's down a lot, low. I don't like those kind of numbers. The critical question is the number on the bottom big enough to matter? And if, when you go through and do your sales forecast and you figure out how much something is going to cost you and all your expenses and all that, that number on the bottom is good enough, then fine. And if it's not good enough, I don't care what kind of percentages markups you make. Is that addressing your question?
No.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Well, try it again. Let's get at it.
That's all right.
All right, well, come look for me later and let's go through your particular example. Yes, sir?
You mentioned your touched on funding sources.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I also teach a class, SCORE has a class downtown called Show Me the Money. Show Me the Money, the sole purpose of that, it's a 3-hour class, I don't know how much it costs, maybe it's $40. The sole purpose of that is to take you through some funding sources. They do it in 3 hours. I'm going to do this in, I hope, under 3 minutes. Do the best I can. If you have enough money to be self-funding, the discussion is over. Right? You write a check, you're in business. Most of us are not in that boat. If not, what can you do? Most common source of startup funds is, anybody?
Bootstrapping.
Friends and family. Yeah. You go to mom, you go to anybody you can, you try to get them interested in your business, and you hope that they will contribute something, usually in return for some part of your business. But not necessarily. Sometimes I have one client where their parents just said, look, we worked our whole lives so that you will not have to do some of the things we had to do. We've made some money. Here it is. Just go start a business. We don't want to do anything with it. We just want you to be happy. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, ma'am?
With friends, do you have to write a contract or some sort?
Always should. You should have a contract no matter what. It can be short, but if they're going to be part of your business, because they're giving you $20,000 for 10% of your business, you want something that says, in return for $20,000, you get 10%. Because if you don't, and you die, or you sell the business, or nobody knows what to do otherwise. You always should have something in writing.
Just go to a lawyer.
Pardon me?
Just go to a lawyer, or you write?
Yeah, it's good enough. I mean, it's a simple thing to do. All right, so friends and families on the top of your, excuse me. If you're self-funding, friends and family. If neither of those work, what are your alternatives? Sell equity to strangers. Hard to do, but if you have the right connections, you can do it. When somebody says sell equity, that means you're selling part of your company in return for some cash remuneration. Anybody watch Shark Tank? Everybody, fun show, right? Shark Tank basically is overly dramatic and a bunch of baloney, except for one thing. Somewhere in the show, the 4 or 5 guys are going to sit there in the front and say, well, I like that one. I'll give you $200,000 for 30% of your business. And the guy, then he spins out of control after that. That part is realistic. That is really the way the deal will be couched. They will say, if you go to these kind of guys, and it's okay, there's nothing wrong with them. They will say, I will give you this much money for this percent of your business. And you have a decision to make. Are you willing to sell 20 or 30 or whatever it is percent of your business? It is typically not a trivial percentage. So that's outside equity. You go to the bank and get a loan. Banks usually do not give startup loans. They might give a line of credit depending on whether you've got a mortgage with them or not. It also depends on it depends on a lot of things. But they're not typically excited about giving startup loans. There are exceptions. Do not go to a big bank. Don't go to Wells Fargo, don't go to Chase, don't go to those guys. They're not going to give you. Go to your community bank. The guy across the street, the Barrington
Bank,
Barrington Bank is a Wintrust bank. They will lend to you.
but they will not lend for somebody under 1 year in business. That's
Oh, I
their
didn't know that.
threshold.
That's their policy. Okay, thanks, Mike. So, there's different policies, but there's something there. The big banks aren't worth going through the revolving door. So, fund it yourself, friends and family, sell equity, look for loans. Go to a place like Axion. Axion funds startups. They're downtown. They make what we call micro loans. I think their upper limit for a startup used to be, I was going to say 50,000. It's 70 now? It's 50 now. Yeah, I think 50 is right. But, you know, the critical thing is they do it. The other thing you should know is that they will probably charge you, I had one of my clients who did this, depends on a lot of things, somewhere between 12 and 14%. Well, you know, what are you going to do? You're a high-risk guy if you're starting up with no history. And maybe you have no assets, right? You've got nothing that they can fall back on. So that's the way it is. There are a bunch of choices. There's a new choice out there now that a couple of years wasn't there. This is what we call unconventional funding. Some of you may have heard of this. There's things like Quick Start. There's half a dozen of these things. Typically, they're web-based, where in return for something, where the something really might not be of much value, people give small amounts of money. But if you get enough people, as you pointed out, maybe you can make it work. The rules on these things are a little loose, and they're about to be changed, so I can't give you a lot of detail, but they exist. So you've got a variety of choices. Squeeze that quarter. My father used to say, squeeze the quarter until the eagle comes off. But that's what happens when you're starting. Yes, ma'am.
I was pleasantly surprised and intrigued to read an article about Barrington High School having a startup incubator with a $250,000 fund
I'm stunned.
for high school students who come up with businesses.
I'm stunned.
Now, if I read that article right, that means there's $250,000 sitting there ready to be given away to high school
Mike,
kids.
you're shaking your head like you've heard this one.
Oh, I've heard that, non-prospect ones are sort of tell you.
No kidding.
Therefore, if some high school kids can get Barrington, and this is not from taxpayer dollars, is my understanding, this is from residents, to give them $250,000 to high school students, where are these private investors and venture capitalists who should be funding and building businesses, sustainable businesses in Barrington, like they have done in other towns like Arlington Heights?
Well, it's not that they don't exist, it's just that they're hard to find. Axion is a good example of someone who will do that.
But what you said, that's a loan.
Yeah, that's,
These are, yeah,
they're doing equity.
we're talking about angel investors who aren't going to rape you, take half or 30 or 40, 50% of your business for $250,000.
They're around.
Where are, well, they're around.
I was one. I lost a lot of money.
So where does a person who has one of those high risk, already profitable, customer-based businesses that's going to scale quickly?
Go to the website. Angels used to be individual people. That's no longer so true. There are now bands of angels, they call themselves. You'll be able to find them on the web.
Now, I got you. Now, I don't want to misspeak. I have angels. I have angels in the Netherlands. I'm looking for,
How much you need?
is there interest? And are there people in Barrington interested? Are there funds in Barrington? Again, if they gave the high school kids $250,000, where are they?
Well, I can't explain the high school. I've never heard anything like that. And at least in my opinion, high school shouldn't be in business. But they are, so what's the difference? My suggestion would be, literally, go to an angel group that perhaps isn't even in the industry you're looking for, but they'll know the other ones. It's not as if there's tens of thousands of these guys. And hunt around and ask them just that question.
The Capitol Theater got I found an angel.
Oh, I heard about this Capitol. If you run down the street.
Yeah, they got an angel to help them to switch to digital projection and
Yeah.
so on. So,
That was Kickstarter.
available.
Yeah, that was Kickstarter.
Was it Kickstarter?
Crowdfunding.
Kickstarter.
Crowdfunding is a new thing, and it typically works in the arts. I'm surprised that it worked for the theater guy. But it did.
Well, they got $10 a month. I thought it was a
Critical. And literally, you just gave it to them. Or maybe they gave you a ticket to the first one.
No. It was a good project. And
Makes you feel funny
Okay.
about that.
You just gave it to them, you got basically nothing.
Yeah.
It was a charity.
So the money is here.
It's for the village.
Well, I understand, but you got basically
Right.
nothing back. But I don't think that's what she's looking for. She's not looking to go to $20,000 each.
Exactly, yeah.
try to find yourself an angel fund, even if it's not, what kind of business is this one that you're looking for?
I have a smart healthcare startup.
I think you will find angels interested in startup, whether in healthcare. They may not be interested in one of that size. I can't tell. But even if they aren't, they have to know somebody who is. So try it that way and see what happens. And if it still doesn't work, come look for me and one of my other guys and see what's wrong. Yes, sir.
Going back to like researching the competition.
Yeah.
Part of my researching competition is actually going to use my competition. How do I find, and this is going to be more for defining price points. How do I kind of get into and find out actually what their costs are so I can kind of model that? Because obviously they're going to upcharge.
If they are privately held, is that term understood?
Yes.
Okay. If they are privately held, the best thing you can do is one of these RMA kind of things, or maybe go to a trade association. Because then their identity is masked and they're sort of commingled at once. If they are not privately held, or if they're a significant sized operation of one that is privately held, then you go to the financial statements and it's easy.
Okay.
So it depends where you look. Anybody else?
Mark, you mentioned franchises earlier.
Ah.
We're an emerging franchise, and I just wanted to mention that their franchise, there's over 3,000 different franchises. They're in every field that you can think of.
Yeah.
And one of the big differences is that they provide you with a system. In other words, rather than trial and error and reinventing the wheel, you have a system that's already been proven in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's good.
Also, they'll train you and give you ongoing support afterwards. So you're paying a fee for that, but you're also saving from the mistakes that you won't make.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you. There is one other place you might want to go for funding. Oh, well, it won't be young. If you are buying a business or buying part of a business, you may be able to find what we call seller financing, which is a fancy way of saying you and the guy agree on a price, but maybe you don't have to pay for a year or two. For example, I am working with a client, maybe this will become a deal, maybe it won't. Wants to buy a building in Wilmette. The building is owned by a wealthy family. His offer is, I'll pay you guys what you want, but I want decreased rent for the first year. And then we'll go up in steps. In the last years, I'll pay you more than what you're asking in rent. In other words, they're financing his startup. Now that might work. Another source of credit, and again, I don't know if this will do you any good, might be your suppliers. If you can get them to underwrite your inventory for some period, they give you 90-day terms or something. If you have suppliers, you, for example, don't have suppliers, right? So that doesn't do you any good. So there are some smaller deals that you can work, but typically you can't finance the whole business that way. So you might have to have a mix of deals. Someone said, this lady said, she had a line of credit. Typically, if the bank will give you a loan, they'll give you a term loan, you have to pay back so much a month for so many months. And by the way, I'll give you a line of credit, which is some amount that might go up and down in the course of the year, and they expect it to zero over a year. So there's some games you can play, but believe me, I sympathize with you. It's a been there, done that. It's not easy. It's a lot of tin cup stuff you go out there.
Actually, you just brought up a good point as opposed to starting a business, buying another business.
Yeah.
What's the advantage, disadvantage, and how would you actually do your business?
The disadvantage is easy to talk about, particularly if they're small businesses. Their financial statements are questionable, so there's an unusually high element of risk. Even if it's from somebody you know, you can mitigate that risk, but if it's a total stranger, you really, really want to look and see if you believe what that business is worth. Right? So what are the risks? You might question the veracity of the seller because nobody's looking over his shoulder and can tell you anything. Maybe a broker will get in the way and help you out. The good news is, particularly if you think he's honest and you know something about the business and there's a history that you trust, a lot of the startup problems have been worked out for you. You know, maybe he's got some employees doing stuff. You hit the ground running. Maybe he'll do some seller financing for you. You know, he's 75 years old, he's looking to get out, and maybe he'll it'll take a little less now for an annuity, so you might be able to play around. So there's good news and bad news, and there are reputable brokers out there that can help you navigate that stuff. Shouldn't overlook it. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am, last
I
one.
have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm having a disagreement with some of my, they're not really board members, they're my supporters, in that since it's a not-for-profit, my thought is our launch is going to be 2014. I already have my grant. My thought is to keep it home-based to save money so that the product can be, I can reach more people with the product. And a lot of my materials are contributed, so I have a very low overhead. But many of my, and these are people who are out in the sphere, who've written grants and are PhDs and all of this, and they say it's better to have an actual brick and mortar business from the start with letterhead and not, you know.
It's better to be solvent than anything.
That's what I
So what
I have
you
a spare bedroom, that's.
What you, but the only real way to answer that is you gotta prepare those financial statements.
Yeah, we have those,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's a perception, that's my, I don't really care about people's perception of it, but many of my supporters are saying it's really important business, and since I've never ran a
In
business.
2013, frankly, unless you expect to see people come to you, nobody knows if you have a physical presence or not.
No one's
That's-
coming to me.
No one's gonna know. You can get
Like a
a
post
real
office
ad,
box.
don't get a PO box, but you can, if you go, I think to UPS, it might be FedEx, you will get a street address,
Okay,
because they actually have street addresses for their post, so no one will know that they might charge you another $5 an office. But you'll get a street address,
Okay.
specifically for people like you. You will get your own phone number. You can go through Google and get a free phone number that will forward to your home number if you want to, or to a different number. There's no way, short of coming to see you, that anyone knows that you don't have an office. And frankly,
thank
if
you.
you need an office,
I don't need an office.
you can get them for a day at a time with receptionists. I mean, these people bring them up to date, and if you really can't convince them, you know how to get them. Because
No, all of our work is done on site.
there's nothing to talk about. They're just not.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yes, ma'am. Last one, because we got to get out.
No question, the only thing I was going to add to that is, by the day, you can even get an office by the hour in
Oh, I didn't know that.
beautiful building in Schaumburg.
Okay. I mean,
I don't need an office, so
This
it's
is-
just, it's the perception for the grant was,
but you got the grant.
yeah, I did.
So they got nothing to say to
I
it.
think they mean in the auditing, that, you know,
Most banks.
do you want an
have
auditor
rooms
coming
that
to your
let you-
spare
Take it to
bedroom?
a 1-hour office when you schedule that meeting.
She's quite right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You just said don't do a PO box.
Yeah.
What is the reason?
Because the PO box is a tip-off that says, I'm not permanent. I can't afford to really be in business.
And what is your solution?
Go to FedEx and give them $5 more. Instead of the PO box, they'll give you a street address.
And they put the stuff in the field.
Yes,
Awesome. Thank you.
my pleasure.